who's VP of Design for Innovation at Virtusa. Stephen.
Thank you. Great. Okay, so great session there. Do we have any entrepreneurs in the room? Anyone? Okay, a few people there. We feel your pain. Entrepreneurs, 2, 3. Do we have any people from xLabs in the room? Thank you for the, that's great, okay. So I'm Stephen Wood. I'm from xLabs. xLabs is a really tiny piece of a really large company. So we've got 22,000 engineers, and xLabs is our innovation unit, where we've got 100 mixture of engineers, designers, and consultants that are focused on innovation. And what I wanted to talk about over the next 10 minutes is our journey to a slightly unexpected place. Traditionally, we work with large banks in the US and throughout Europe, helping them with their innovation processes, helping them work with Fintechs, and helping them drive better outcomes. So our mantra is always that we're focused on tech-enabled innovation, purely tech-enabled innovation, but we're also obsessed with outcomes. Because we've seen far too many prototypes remain on shelves, remain stuck upon walls, and never actually get into the real world and create value. And those prototypes are usually quite short-lived. So one of the things we do is we look at emerging tech, and every year we publish the Trend Almanac. So this usually has like 10 to 15 emerging trends. We mix those across technology and human trends as well. So we're not just purely focusing on tech, because we know that innovation happens at the intersection between technology and the way that society is working. Often we have to spend a lot of time telling engineers that if you want to put a dent in the world, you've got to work out where the world's moving to. Otherwise, you just end up kicking the air. It's not very successful. This year, we've also got a whack-a-mole game for those who are frustrated with competing with big tech who keep playing their big budget cards. So you get to whack Jack Ma and Bezos on the head to win a virtual prize. So a lot of the work we do is working with corporate innovation labs. And given the fact that we've been to so many, we've started to build up sort of a map of the key trends. And we know that typically you'll find a number of things in all corporate innovation labs. First of all, there will always be Lego. Typically, you'll find it, like the ING lab, it's on the wall. If you go up to Capital One, they've got a big basket of it. If you hear a slightly sickening crack underfoot, you look down, there's going to be a little disembodied guy there. There'll always be Lego. There will always be more greenery in that area of the business than anywhere else. If there's a green wall, the hydroponics will always come on when you're asking people to feed back the ideation session so you don't hear a thing. And there will always be warnings about what happens if you don't invest in innovation produced by the group that actually does the innovation. So you'll find posters on the wall with Blockbuster, Kodak, all the people that have passed into obscurity because they failed to innovate. And there will always be plywood. Innovation cannot happen without plywood. If you walk into a room and there's no plywood, just turn around. It is the fuel of innovation for all corporate innovation labs. But we also, we need to talk about Post-it notes as well. God, really? So these rooms are peppered in Post-it notes. And one of the things that we kind of learned early on is when you come into a corporate innovation lab and you talk about helping them with ideation, helping them understand how emerging technologies are going to help them reshape their business, their industry, disrupt, coming to them and helping them form ideas, that's not really what they're after. In a lot of the sessions we've had sitting down with the leaders of innovation labs, they say, what the world needs now is not another Post-it note. And they say, if you want to help us, focus on 2 areas. So here we have, the aha moments that happen down here that we all know and love are the ideas. We're kind of OK there. The oh moments happen when we look at how do we partner with emerging tech players. A lot of the times, the process of actually getting that relationship in place is troublesome. A lot of the time, people don't trust the Fintechs. We've got really new companies starting with really old companies whose procurement are only used to dealing with companies that are the same size as them, that have the 16-month due diligence process baked in. So at that point, a lot of things fall into the trough of disaster. The main thing that we focused on was how do we get things from prototype to production? Again, this idea of how do we get things from the shelf into production where they're adding value to banks, to their customers, to their colleagues, and ultimately their shareholders. and then we come back. If we do all of that right, then we're going to get outcomes. If not, we're going to get pretty deliverables. Lots of people are going to spend time in Photoshop, Illustrator, XD, and it'll look great in promotional videos, but it won't actually hit the street. So what we did was we came together and we said, we need to create something really holistic, something that brings together the whole innovation process in a single place, and not just as the idea management tools do, helping you to do the workflow. Not just as the fintech curators do with doing the Tinder service for companies and fintechs, and not just the tech companies that help to bolt things together. We need all of this in one place. One of the key things that we found was ideation's great, prototyping's great, but the thing that stops us is when we talk to the IT department. And our cycle time, we work rapidly in months. They're talking about quarters, or yeah, we can fit this in next year. It's just the wrong period. So how do we address the difference between the way IT works and the way that innovation practices work? So as you see in the top right there, we have API management and sandbox tools. So what we're doing is bringing in the IT guys from the very beginning and working with them in partnership so that the ideas are shared right from the beginning. We understand the feasibility, desirability, and viability right up front, and they're actually buying in. We've seen people go from being cynical to being evangelical about ideas that then go into production because technology has been baked in from the beginning. So this is kind of how we help big banks. We've got a process slide there. OK. So then we started having different conversations. We started talking to people like development banks and regulators. And we showed them this tool. We said, this is how we help big banks. And they went, fantastic. You've done a great tool that's going to help drive financial inclusion. No, it helps big banks to innovate at speed, accelerating innovation, and driving better returns from innovation. No. What you've defined is a tool that's going to help the developing world drive financial inclusion. I said, OK, no, we work with big banks. I said, no, but if you think back to how the financial inclusion agenda is being defined, one of the key pillars that's driving greater financial inclusion is technology. But one of the main problems is, in the developing world, the banks that need to adopt this technology are addressing issues. And they went, they're kind of these issues. And we said, OK, these are familiar issues. And yes, we know. And your tool addresses them. So we've got the same around partnering, skepticism about partnering. We've got the same around production. And we've got a focus on outcomes. Because a lot of the banks that we're working with in the developing world have a much lower risk tolerance, have a much higher scrutiny on the return on investment. And these are guys that are very traditional. Often when you go into banks to hold workshops and talk about the systems they're using, we're not talking about sort of SAP or Finacle. We're talking about Excel and potentially in one case paper, which is a bit of a shock. So talking to them, they describe their situation as this. They see digital transformation as something that is predominantly favoring the large international banks. In some interviews, we've heard them say, OK, this isn't really for us. We feel really excluded. And to hear a banker say, I feel excluded, is kind of refreshing for us. So what we need to do is, how do we lower the barrier to get them engaged in conversations about digital transformation and innovation, tech-enabled innovation? And how do we help them decide the friends and the foes in the fintech arena? Because there are a lot of people out there constantly badgering them, offering them a way forward. So how do we help them to work with those partners? Because again, if you work with big fintechs and developing world banks, they work in very different ways. So you need to try and foster a relationship and a different way of working to drive that positive outcome. And ultimately, how can you reinforce and help them to communicate the success of their ventures in their wider company? So suddenly they develop a reputation for driving positive outcomes from innovation programs. So the next question that we faced was, once we provide the tools, the digital tools to emerging banks, they have two options. Option one, they focus on the unbanked. They help us to develop the financial inclusion agenda. Option two, They use the same tools to fight over the same customers they've been fighting over for years with their competing banks, so completely ignoring the agenda. So we sat down and we had lots of conversations around how we could drive the right outcome from our intervention, from the systems we designed and the technologies we put into place. And we knew this wouldn't be easy, because the easiest road is to take the digital tools you can see applied in developed economies targeting the middle class and the high net worth and just apply it in your market. So the good thing is we're not alone here. So we have a consortium of people working with us to help to noodle out that massively wicked problem. We're working with regulators, we're working with local fintech associations, we're working with banks that have a real appetite for driving change, and we're working with development banks as well, who know that the financial inclusion agenda is high on their list as well. And we know that we've got to change hearts and minds at 3 places within the process. We've got to change the banks so that they focus on the right people, so that they get over their fear of fintechs, that they understand that actually working with some of the smaller people can help you to gain competitive advantage, and we can help you with the due diligence, we can help you with the assurance, and we can help you to get the solutions across the line. For fintechs, we have a similar conversation. So a lot of them are focused not on emerging economies and the unbanked, they're focused on developed economies, high net worth, and traditional customers. So talking to them and bringing the associations to say, OK, what we can do with your technology is we can make a whole new section of society an addressable customer base. And we can do that in a way where the risk is underwritten by regulators and banks, so it's not something where you're going out on a limb. And then the most challenging area is reaching out into the unbanked. How can we help them to understand how can they access new technologies? How can they become more au fait with formalized banking? How can they lose their skepticism about dealing with a banking system that might have let them down in the past? So we've got change at 3 levels. We need to change banks, change fintechs, and ultimately the outcome we're looking for is to change lives. That's back, that's forward. OK. So to wrap things up, we started off talking about who we usually work for, the Citibanks, the JP Morgans, and how we've developed tools to help them accelerate their journey. But what we found is we can easily apply those. Well, easily is probably the wrong word. We can apply those in a different context. Not only can we drive a digital transformation that's going to change banks, we can also apply it and work with banks and regulators to change lives as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.